Welcome to Psilocybin Says. In this first installment of a new series, Eric and Courtney explore the spectrum of analytical and intuitive approaches that one might embody in facilitation. Human personality naturally defies category, and that makes this space fascinating. What enters your mind when you think about where you and others might locate in the multidimensional spectrum of facilitation? Courtney and Eric start the ball rolling here, so let your perspective help color in the picture in the comments. You're listening to Psilocybin Says. To support it, subscribe on YouTube and podcasts, and stay connected on Instagram and TikTok.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Psilocybin Says. You know us.
Hey.
We know a lot of you, and that feels really good to have a community of listeners out there.
Yeah.
And those that we don't know, get to know us. Look us up in the old social media, the YouTube channel. We like to engage in the comments there. We had some great comments on the last video. Thanks for that.
Yeah, we did. That was a great little conversation. Appreciate those of you who commented. It'd be cool to have like another live hangout type of thing for
also,
our listeners.
I just want to say that I appreciate the people who recognize that I'm not a right-wing conspiracy theorist just because I'm questioning some of the narrative. I do want to continue to question narratives for sure, while not diving off into some crazy reptilians have taken over the government and infiltrated our religious organizations.
Yeah,
but they might have.
Not publicly, anyway.
Might have. I mean, I'm not saying they haven't. I'm definitely not saying they have. Anyway.
Yeah, it's fun to, tiptoe on the on the leading edge of the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Which this is a rabbit hole we're about to go down. We are wanting to do another 3-part series on facilitation. Pretty unique perspective, I think, on this.
If you haven't checked out our 3-part series on eating mushrooms at home is what I think titled it, but it's a 3-part series on preparing for your mushroom dose, what to expect during your mushroom dose, and what to expect after your mushroom dose. Definitely check that out if you haven't yet. So yay for series.
Yay. And in this one today, particularly, we're going to be covering the spectrum of psychedelic facilitators. As Courtney and I were talking about this, kind of reflecting on it as if there's two poles here that we're bouncing between. One is the role of therapist or psychiatrist, the psychological, more material perspective, thinking about brain chemistry and personal history and all that kind of really historical, material-based perspective. And then the complete other end, which has often been called shamanism, neo-shamanism, energy work. I don't know. It's hard for me anyway to really come up with concise descriptive language because it is such a spectrum, and there's just not a lot of great language that we have for this, particularly because shamanism is such a horribly misappropriated word. The origin of the word shaman is from one specific tribe in Siberia, I believe, the Tungus tribe, who were actually mushroom shaman. They worked with the Amanita muscaria. Oh, look, I'm wearing my Amanita muscaria.
Look at you.
From,
like you were prepared for this little moment.
Always prepared for the weird. So anyway, facilitation.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to be teasing this out throughout this episode for, us and individually.
For sure.
I have like way more questions, honestly, than answers, I think. Like even you just said that therapy tends to be more historical based or what term did you use? Therapy or we saying
psychiatry, psychological.
Whatever, the medical kind of licensure type of descriptor of facilitating. And also like when you were talking about the more energy working side, spiritual realm side, it brought up for me that a lot of that work is historical based. I mean, there's a lot of like past life type of regression
past life, like that's some very,
it's spiritual historical.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm talking about Western, centered around the brain and your memories and your personal experience, the traumas that you face,
the things we can like poke at with a knife and we can study an organ, we can dissect that physical realm. It's like kind of a very physical realm.
More so. And even the non-physical, the memories and that kind of stuff, it is still grounded in a 3D type of experience. Whereas this other end of the spectrum, the spiritual world, is more phenomenological. It trends more towards the ineffable, whereas psychology, psychiatry, therapy is very much about putting words to the feelings. I don't know that that's the case with the other. So, what about you? Are you a shaman or are you a therapist?
Wow. I oscillate between, I'm definitely not a therapist. Like I'm not a licensed therapist, that's for sure. Nor am I a taught energy worker. I have no real training. I guess that's not true. That's not true. Don't discredit yourself, Courtney. You do have training.
Good.
Come on. So, I went to school for public health education, and I did get education and certifications in like wellness coaching, which is kind of a happy blend between the two. Really, there's a lot of tapping into things you can't really describe or put words to in at least the type of wellness coaching that I was trained in. There's different models, but it's like a blend of looking at logically what you want in your life and then the in between of like how you feel and like intuition, utilizing your intuition to set goals and to move forward from like a stuckness type of thing. There's a lot of talk about intuition in that work.
So about ancestors and spirits and aliens, interdimensionals.
Again, depends on what wellness coaching freaking institution you.
And I think it's important. I think it's important here
definitely
for
not the accredited ones.
Any therapists or shamans, self-proclaimed shamans, or anybody that's listening to this. There's not a box that any of these folks fit into necessarily, right? So we're not trying to lump anybody into a single category. We're not trying to make assumptions about, whatever role someone's in, how that plays out. There's tons of crossover here. It is a spectrum. But we are trying to, there does seem to be kind of like a gravitation towards one camp or the other in a lot of cases.
Yeah. This is certainly not a conversation about which one is better.
Unless you're talking about my way.
Yeah, same.
No, but with psychedelics entering into the world of psychotherapy, it's an important conversation to have because historically psychedelics have been purely in the world of shamanism. That's where we got the term shaman, right? So, yeah.
So, I want to hear you talk a little bit more about your experience working with facilitators, since you've trained so many facilitators to work in the mushroom space, or maybe not trained or whatever, kind of like guided and helped. What's your experience been overall? Like, do you find that do you see a trend that in people that come to wanting to facilitate in the mushroom space, leaning one way or the other? What's your experience there in the last 10 years?
Well, it's probably skewed because we tend to attract similar, right?
People come to work with you,
so
knowing
people
your way.
that hear how I work are drawn to that, and people who hear how I work are not drawn to that. They don't come to it. And so I don't know. I think that I see a lot in, my LinkedIn is very psychedelic, and I see a lot of psychotherapeutic approach, a lot of reference to science, a lot of reference to trauma recovery and all that kind of stuff. And, a good number of therapists that I've worked with have, after their own experiences and working with people in the space, tend to move a little more towards the spiritual perspective. I think it's kind of hard not to, as we were saying, they got this world that's very descriptive and language based of psychology and therapy, and then you've got this world that's ineffable and you can't put words to it. And that the mushrooms, like that's one of the chief characteristics of the psychedelics, is that they produce this ineffable experience. So that tends to move you towards the spiritual side, where it gets really interesting is when people start to experience supernatural phenomena. I'm starting to get away from that word too, because it's not actually supernatural. It's natural. It's just not, we're just not accustomed to those experiences necessarily, or ways to interpret them. So, most people tend to, over time, gravitate into the spiritual. And that's where I think it's going to be really interesting to watch the entire field of therapy transition as more folks have these psychedelic experiences. I don't see any way but for it to move towards the spiritual perspective, the metaphysical perspective.
Mm-hmm. Zooming out a little bit, it's interesting to notice like the oscillation of on that spectrum over time. So, I mean, like how long ago, when was like mental health kind of like becoming more commonly?
Oh God.
When was that like less stigmatized? When
last year?
No. But I mean, like the practice of going to a therapist.
Yeah.
Like, when did that begin? Like the 70s or the 60s even? Not even.
Like in the 80s, you started to hear it publicly talked about. There were therapists and psychotherapists in the 50s and 60s and whatnot. And I think Freud was like, in the 20s maybe? I think. So, just call it the 1900s. It's been kind of the slow unveiling or acclimatization towards, therapy and trying to manage our mental health, even acknowledging that mental health. I was thinking about this last night. I am so confident that we are eventually going to scientifically come to describe every human being as neurodivergent. Everybody, we were talking about this a little bit, last night with Amy, and I just this idea that there are these conditions and some people have these conditions. Everybody has a condition, period. And we're going to come to find out, we're going to come to describe the human brain, every single human brain, as unique as every single fingerprint. And so I'm really trying to, I love moving towards this idea of neurodivergent, but even that isn't proper because it indicates that there's an abnormality, right? So neurospecific or unique or whatever, but that's something that it hit me really hard last night. Like, oh wow, and this evolution of exploring the concept of mental health, as we've pathologized stuff, and then we'd say, okay, well then maybe this isn't a pathology, like homosexuality was considered a fucking mental health pathology, we're going to come to find out that everybody's just fucking unique and beautiful in their own way. That's my belief anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm trying to like point out, like it feels like when we're in the midst of something, like a time that is confusing and like if you've been in the world of psychedelics, like professional psychedelic world, which is brand new, in the last 5 years, really, has it really become a field at all? And even then, it's still like a brand new newborn baby.
There are so many experts. It's amazing. It's amazing.
But when you've been doing the work like you've been doing for like 15 plus years, consistently doing the work with people, so many people, and you've been in it for that long, and you see quote unquote experts coming out who have, had a couple mushroom trips and they're excited to start facilitating for people, yet they're talking like, they know everything already because they ate mushrooms twice.
Here's how mushrooms work.
Held space for one person. It can be frustrating, like with any profession, when you were one of the first people in the profession to kind of like in these times or whatever to get it started. I mean, it can feel a little frustrating to see, I think, like the ugly evolution process. I mean, I've witnessed that.
Yeah,
anyway.
I'm really wanting to move away from the frustration, though. I'm consciously doing that,
right?
And just like accepting. It's like as my child learns to walk. I'm not like, you fucking moron. Why aren't you walking at 6 months now? Right?
Sure.
And there's just the reality that I continue to see how little I know, how much I have to learn in this space and in life in general. So, I just want to be. I have been frustrated and critical, but that's really more of a reflection of myself than it is on anybody else. And so, we
did a whole podcast episode on that, didn't we?
I don't fucking know. No, but we are.
Where you're apologizing to all the researchers and all
the yeah. Well, I mean, anyway, I won't go to that, but it's just an evolution.
Yeah, and that is the beauty of being able to take notes and pass them on to future generations. Like the study of history is being able to see, like, oh wait, like we've actually come a long way, even though it feels like we've lost a lot of information or we've gone astray, or I feel like there's a lot of that talk right now too about where we're at in society. And
I want to say this because it's relative to this topic, and but like I think where I'm starting to have an opening in myself that allows me to be less judgmental and frustrated. There's a member who is a member of Sanctuary who is a medical professional. And this individual is very science-based, of course, and he is really involved and seems very interested in a lot of the conversations we have, and he also shares his perspective when it differs and whatnot. And I don't know what happened, but after a minister training the other night that he was on, after we came away, I realized how insecure I feel when there's someone from that field there. But the reason is that I've felt insecure is because I haven't considered myself a scientist or a researcher because I don't write shit down. But I am very much practicing real science in the psychedelic space because I am going in, observing lots of data over long periods of time, coming up with theories, testing them. Just because I'm not writing it down, putting in a spreadsheet, having my scientific process fully described out in an outline doesn't mean that I'm not practicing science. And so there was just, I don't know what the switch was that flipped. I think it's just that I see him respecting my perspective and that he doesn't always agree with it or doesn't understand it, but he respects it because he can tell that I'm experienced. And I think that he sees me doing science, even though I haven't seen. And I could be completely projecting, and I don't really care because it helps me feel better about myself and place in this world. But it just kind of it speaks to, just like you were saying, valuing yourself and acknowledging yourself. And that's just something that over the years I have not done. I've looked for a lot of external validation from these scientists and whatnot, and I'm starting to realize that I am very much a scientist of the psychedelic space.
Yeah, I mean, we all can be scientists, really.
Well, just like our book, we've talked about science versus scientism. Like there are folks out there that have a belief and then they just apply that belief and that perspective onto the subject matter rather than allowing the subject matter and the experience and the exploration of that subject matter inform their beliefs. And so that's what I know that I continue to try to do. So in the minister training, I think it's in the friends and family minister training where we're educating our ministers on best practices and holding space for their loved ones.
there is a whole chapter kind of touching on this, right?
On what, the supernatural?
Talking about the different modalities that exist today in modern times, like this year. It's evolving so quickly, but as far as approaches, there's the clinical approach to holding space, and then there's the like more traditional and indigenous ways of holding space. And if I'm remembering correctly, there's like a kind of like pros and cons.
Well, there's a perspective, perspectives from each.
Yeah.
But the training and the materials definitely trend more towards the supernatural, just because that's just been my experience. And I want to prepare people for that as much as I can, and I do wonder what's going to happen or how it's going to unfold when in these clinics where we're having people having psilocybin experiences, when like telepathy occurs, or when like entities are encountered, how that's all going to be interpreted and possibly even shift the perspectives. Again, it comes down to this, whether or not the institutions will apply their predetermined theories, or predetermined perspective onto the experience, or whether they will allow the experience to cause them to question their understanding.
Yeah, so I guess I do want to talk a little bit about the perspectives of on the spectrum, because it is a spectrum. It's not black and white.
For sure.
It's not like you're one or the other. You're either a therapist or you're a energetic healer, however you want to call it. So like, and I don't even like pros and cons.
No.
But how each are helpful or not helpful, but do you get what I'm trying to say?
Just contribute or detract. Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, like, just thinking about like memories and historical experiences of trauma, and classical Western therapy is you sit down and you talk about these experiences, and that can very much serve a purpose. I have spent thousands of hours with people letting them talk about their historical trauma, family, friends, whatever it is, relationships, you name it, there's all kinds. Military, PTSD, and just the stuff that people experience. But this is where people come to the realization that therapy only goes so far, because you can talk and you can talk and you can talk about all things. You can remember them and you can, try to pick them apart and understand their origin. But then what? We see that that's limited, and that's why psychedelics are, spoken of as 10, 20 years in therapy in one night, which is not always the case. Can be, but not always. Because after you go past that place of language is where real release occurs. We spend the entirety of our lives, everything I'm looking at right now, I'm immediately thinking of a name for it, right? Putting it into some kind of a box, and therefore immediately limiting it. So, talking about the occurrences can move us toward experiencing the energy, right? But it's in allowing that energy that is kind of almost held back by the language to release through this nonverbal, ineffable experience is when massive, massive progress is made. So, I think that Western therapy is an incredible way to open the door to the metaphysical experience. And then once you get in there, this is where I believe it really, really requires or greatly benefits from working with someone who has spent a lot of time in that non-descriptive place. And the other two parts of this series that we're going to be talking about, one is whether or not facilitators should be dosing alongside of their clients or people that they're working with. And then the other is whether or not facilitators should be dosing at all, having a personal practice and what that should look like. Because and this is why, because eventually if you're working with someone, you're going to get to that place where the words don't work, but that doesn't mean that you are no longer able to be of assistance, right? What I've found, you talk about training facilitators and whatnot, working with folks, especially as we do these online Zoom trainings and we're getting ready to have this collective of ministers come together and dose together, I am exceedingly confident that we will be able to facilitate much deeper understanding, sharing that space together without words than we ever could with these, written curriculums or verbal trainings. I've seen it. I've seen people that I've worked with who came into the space completely brand new, me be able to, or not even me, just for there to be the ability to transfer information from field to field, from quantum system to quantum system without any language. That is magical. It's incredible.
You mean like in the mushroom space?
Yes.
Specifically, okay.
Yeah, like when I'm working with a facilitator, I can talk and talk and talk about a phenomena and things that you experience. But when you get in there and you're not talking and you're experiencing, and through one individual's consciousness influences another individual's consciousness. Right?
Sure.
And so to be able to help expand consciousness for individuals without saying a word, that's the next level of this. And that's why I believe that, spoiler alert, long-term facilitators who are looking to serve in this role of mystical, not therapist, counselor, whatever, definitely need to be working with the sacrament, with these sacred medicines in their own personal practice.
Yeah. There's so much there.
Well, I mean, for yourself, you've had a fair amount of experience, and you came from this more classically trained wellness coaching world, and you didn't grow up necessarily in a highly spiritualized environment. And so I'm curious how your perspective going into the mushroom space originally, after those university trainings, how that has evolved, having had your own experiences and being in the presence of, group experiences where weird stuff happens.
Well, as I'm reflecting on it, so I've talked about this quite a bit, that I grew up ice skating competitively. And when I reflect back on that, there was really no textbook for that. There was never a time where someone was like, sit down, not never, maybe like a few times, but over the course of from the time I was 6 years old to 19, maybe several times practicing, 5-6 days a week ice skating. Did someone say, read about how to do a triple sow cow or whatever?
That's
no.
the weirdest name.
I know.
Sow cow.
No, it was completely 100% experiential. 100%. It was like, that has set the foundation for like me going into college and learning. It was very challenging for me to learn. It has been my whole life to read and obtain information. I'm like a kinesthetic learner. I have to like move and talk out loud when I'm reading to retain information. So it makes all the sense in the world to me. Like it has since I can remember that textbook learning is not, it doesn't come close to like actually having the experience. I'm sure everyone can relate. It's like talking about sex versus having sex. It's like completely different experience. Like completely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and not that I haven't recognized the value in recording information and learning from other people in that way, because I do really enjoy reading. Like the older I've gotten, I've enjoyed learning in that way. And but yeah, as far as like the spiritual realm, like my first mushroom experience, it just blew my mind. I'd never had any kind of spiritual framework really to work from. So, and like even in this, it's funny because we're talking about like the spectrum of talking about and analyzing the history of an experience and talking about it versus like, just being in the space and experiencing it. I was like, we're talking about it now. It's like kind of hard to, should we just like put our microphones down? Because I feel like the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, I don't know if we're, should we just, yeah, let's just be with you all.
There's an irony there for sure.
For the next 30 minutes. See what information we can transfer. Not say anything.
I mean, the first trip you had that girl that you were with and went into a weird loop. And I mean, did you see that as like a psychological experience? Did you see that? How did you interpret that?
How did I interpret that? Oh, not a spiritual experience. I didn't think that was a spiritual experience. I guess I felt like mentally, I was thinking more in terms of like a mental experience. These thoughts that are repetitive for her are just playing out in real time. But I didn't think about like her higher self being involved or any other forces
or chakras
being there, or like anything outside of like her immediate physical space. Wasn't thinking at all about that. And even still, it for me, it takes usually somebody in my presence to kind of like flip the switch of talking about other realms and dimensions and other beings that exist here with us that we may not be able to see, having someone else kind of bring that conversation in for me to remember like these like waking ups that happened for me.
So can you look back at that experience now and apply a spiritual lens to it in any way?
I would say that in the way of when I think about that person's evolution throughout their time as a being, like outside of this life, and like that big zooming out perspective, combined with the fact that the mushrooms that we ate were like mushrooms that you grew, most likely, me not knowing you at the time, and that experience like kind of leading me to hold off eating mushrooms till I met you. Like, I don't know, yes, there's a spiritual perspective there, like in the sense of something so much bigger that I can't comprehend, type of way. But yeah, that's about it. There's something there too, like that brings up for me in my evolution of practicing with the mushroom, in being able to go into the experience, letting go of the mental in order to have the experience. I feel like I had a number of experiences with the mushroom where I had to be reminded of that. Like, remember, this isn't a space to analyze. This isn't a space to think. This is a space to experience and let go and feel. And so now when I go into a mushroom experience, I go in, I feel myself mentally, like in the hours leading up to eating mushrooms. Now it's like my frontal lobe already starts to shut off. Like I start going into the spiritual realm before I even eat mushrooms. And by the time, like 30 minutes into the experience, at least in the last couple of experiences I've had, there's not this like giant wall that I have to chip through, like mental wall of like, it's okay to let go. Like, it's okay, which was a pretty major theme. So, and we see that with people too, that are eating mushrooms for, they're not very experienced in eating mushrooms, and kind of see them kind of like chipping through this, entering into the spiritual realm for the first time, and letting go of that. So, yeah.
I mean, maybe the challenge, or I don't want to say problem, but the block that we have is we separate the two. We separate the material from the spiritual, the psychological from the shamanic, and the lines they're just ever blurred. This painting, this physical painting right here, I can easily apply a spiritual, the painting of a shaman, so I could very easily apply, and the person that painted this and gave it to me and all that. But even, thinking about like a couch or the microphones, very, very material things that we might not apply a spiritual perspective to, understanding that this is all an outcome of someone's imagination, and that imagination comes from this intuition that comes from this ineffable world, this spirit world, if you will, so everything is like infused all together. And if there is a detrimental perspective that we have in modern Western culture, it's probably this attempt to distinguish the two when they really can't be. Get down to it.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot there. It's tricky because it feels like sitting here talking with you, there's so many layers to it, but like sitting here talking with you, I'm like, well, this is way more physical of an experience than a spiritual experience. Like that would be my first thought, not saying that that's true. Because when I become still, I feel that, it's a spiritual experience and a physical experience at the same time. And also having the mushroom experience and feeling how non-physical it feels. And again, like not necessarily true. However, it feels that way, in a large part because it's like we can't oftentimes use our physical equipment. Not that we can't, but for novices, certainly, like it doesn't feel like there's any use for the hands and the body. And
much less the phone or the other.
Sure, the other tools that we use in this.
Further away from spirit, if our spirit is our center, and our awareness expands out from that, the further we get from that center, the harder it becomes to. There's
it's more like it feels like it's not this, but it feels like it's a limited physical or limited spiritual accessibility in this state, you know, combining like maybe I'm missing something here and I would love to learn that I can have this experience, but working on an Excel spreadsheet whilst, you know, speaking with my ancestors in another realm, like it doesn't feel like it can live in the same moment. That's not necessarily true, but it sure feels that way most of the time. Like,
well, I mean, you can consider the nature of your work and how it contributes to spiritual growth and all of the ancestral history that's led you to where you are now and all that. Like, I think the nature of what we're doing makes it much easier to, for me anyway, to apply a spiritual lens on mundane tasks.
Yeah, indeed.
The subject, one of my favorite subjects that you brought up of sex, I think is a great place to also explore this interface of the physical, non-physical world. You know, you can have I think most people do, as a condition of this Western materialistic paradigm, have a very material experience with sexuality. But as you understand, like, some of the emotional states that you can access, the quasi-physical experiences, like chills. Like, I think about cold chills, right? Like when you're really in that moment, and it just like something else lights up inside of you. You know, that is a powerful way to also kind of expand awareness into these other realities. It's so interesting to me, and seems to be part of the design that the mushroom is this ephemeral physical object, right? They're here and then they're gone. They last just a few days at the most for most of them. And you have to eat it. You have to grow it. You have to nurture it and care for it. And then it provides this spiritual, mystical, ineffable experience. I just feel like that design cannot help but bring some sort of reconciliation for us humans between these two worlds.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're bringing up sex, like, the more I sat with it as you were talking, the more I feel like that is such a potent example that's so related to this conversation. Like, sex being spiritual was not something that I even considered up until like maybe 10 years ago, like shortly before we met. Like, somebody would have said that to me like 15 years ago, would have like not even been able to hear it. I don't think I would have even been able to consider it because I suppose my association with spirituality was religion. Like, they're the same, like, is what I thought.
Right.
And like, sex being like religious, like, what? Sex is icky or like sinful or whatever according to religion. How can they be, you know, is what I thought. But now it's more and more obvious to me that it's inherently spiritual. It's the beginning of creating life. That's the essence of it, is creation. And like that, just talking about sex, like, there's a spectrum there, just like this conversation of, you know, looking at the data on paper or whatever, and then like the more mystical side of it.
I'm thinking of the EKGs that they run on people while they're having orgasm, like what your brain does on sex. Sweet. It's all great information to have, but
yeah. Yeah, I don't want to turn this into a podcast about sex, but we could.
I was just definitely primed for spirituality growing up. Catholicism, particularly mystical Catholicism, appealed to me. Some of the ascetics and monks and those that would go off in these spiritual quests, and in high school, I was reading some pretty deep spiritual texts, and eventually got into some really esoteric and still do stuff. But I think every single topic, you can look at everything. Right now I'm looking at the water jug, right? Or like the plants.
Water jug is spiritual as fuck.
Water is like so spiritual. So spiritual that we perceive it as this chemical material thing. And it is that too, So the psychedelic experience is a psychological experience and it's a spiritual experience. To say whether or not it's more one of the other, I think is probably a disservice. And doing that continues to try and apply this, again, materialistic understanding of it. So it's just something that is so beautifully observed and participated in. It's like when people talk about, somebody was telling me on LinkedIn that me suggesting that facilitators should have a practice in dosing. I'm just and they're like, how that is trying to peer pressure people into taking substances. And what the fuck? This is the safest, most amazing medicine on the planet. One of them anyway. So safe, so incredible, so rich, so much exploration there. Why the fuck would you not want to do that twice a year? Nobody's saying take mushrooms every week.
That's really interesting. That level of resistance to having your own practice, having accountability for your practice. I mean, you would never even think twice, I don't think, about suggesting that a personal trainer works out, has their own workout practice.
Let's save this conversation for the full episode. I will go off on a rant.
I guess there are a lot of...
I will.
There's a lot of... Yeah, that's why we're having a whole episode about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well...
I guess where I would like to see more of an adjustment, I guess I feel like is in both ends of the spectrum. And that's going to take... I suspect that those who are in the material psychiatric, psychological camp are more likely to move towards the center than those who are in the way left woo-woo camp. Now, this could be my own, discriminatory perspective. But I feel like it's harder for the ungrounded. I don't know if that's true, but when I think about, some really flaked out folks, and no offense if you're a fucking flake.
You can step forward now.
But
yeah,
it's just gonna be interesting to see how this all unfolds.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. That's not really something I'd considered.
Think
is it more likely for
folks.
people to soften into remember the cold hard facts into more of an intuition?
Yeah, like your neo shaman. I can think of. Remember years ago when we did that ceremony for your friend who had a nephew that died of an overdose, and we got to her place, and there was that guy there that was gave himself some Native American name, and he was feathers and all the stuff all around. I wonder if he has become more grounded over the years, or if he has trended towards or stayed in that realm.
It happens.
It does happen.
I feel in a way, you have become more grounded over the last since...
I'm not tripping mushrooms 3-6 times a month, so that's that's
that has contributing
to some stability,
right?
But I'm much more in believing in the spirit world, and we're going to see fucking a guy that channels aliens for my birthday,
right? But in the sense of you just feel more, you feel so much more approachable now, and that maybe this is not
no, I think this is good.
Not
I think
exactly
it is similar.
Yeah, specific. It feels like it's related though. I mean, you feel, when I first met you, reflecting on that, you were way more out in space is how I felt. I mean, like you
Okay.
were way more like living there than in conversation with other people, and
That's fair.
real world, not real world. That's
Grounded,
not the
let's say.
term, but you're just more relatable now, like, and able to move in different environments and like types of
also
people and populations of people.
Extremely anti-establishment. Like I was very like living almost isolated out on that farm and taking mushrooms all the time, but
right.
And so being around other people and helping.
I've definitely got friends that when you and I met, that friends that were, I mean, way out there, like complete woo-woo, like woo-woo in the sense of, and that's so derogatory. Like, I don't like to say that, because that can be a really important part of someone's journey, is like just letting the fuck go of all the thinking and the analyzing. And it can look like someone's, a flake, quote unquote, a flake right now in the moment. But like it is important it was important for me to be a flake for a year. I was never like a complete flake. I've always maintained responsibilities to some degree, but and kept to those responsibilities and commitments. But it was important for me to let go of all my analyzing and like planning and to let the pendulum swing for a little bit and then come back to a more grounded place. So it does happen.
I think you're right. I'm wrong.
Sweet. I love that.
No, seriously. And again, this is me applying that judgment, right? Like everybody is on their own individual journey. Everybody's going to evolve and shift over time. Evolution is inevitable, even if it takes lifetimes. So we're probably all going to come closer to center as this story unfolds.
Yeah. We need all of it.
Do you think that generally, and it's hard, maybe we have a bit of a skewed perspective here, but in general terms, is the psychedelic movement more grounded or less grounded, or more clinical or more shamanic overall?
Right now,
like you meet a lot of folks, and again, like we get a bit of a skewed perspective, perhaps, because we are, a church, operating a church. But like when you're doing discovery calls with people, are you seeing more people who are on the woo side or more people who are on the non-woo side?
So comparing to talking with people in Jamaica.
Okay.
So that was a different container for experiencing the mushroom, because like front facing on the website was, do you have PTSD, treatment resistant depression, anxiety, and research says, it's very like research, diagnosis, treatment, whereas there's really none of that language on Sanctuary's website now. So even still, like, there's not a lot of quote unquote woo-woo people that I meet that come to Sanctuary. It's like the majority are professional, well-researched people who this was not an impulse decision for them to be going through a membership process. And we do that's another thing that sets us apart, is we have a process. So it's not so easy to make it to step 5. You have to jump through some hoops. So that weeds out people. I know it does, because there's a lot of people that don't make it to the discovery call. Yeah. So the majority of people feel like pretty grounded, as in they've got businesses or careers, or, you know, they have had successful careers and they're retired and they've got families. And
I love the kinds of therapists that we're seeing coming into Sanctuary because they are grounded in that, you know, historical exploration of personal experience, but also, you know, keep a foot in the world of intuition and unknown.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it does feel like there's more of that, like therapists who are willing to like question what they were taught, you know, like just because this is my training
Trust
and
their own experience.
what my license says I can and cannot say doesn't mean that it's truth. Period. So that's cool. So like, where is this going? Like over the next 100 years, are we going to revert back to like just tribal spiritual experiences?
I think so.
I feel like we are.
I think so. But I hope anyway, we embody what, you know, Terrence McKenna talked about in this kind of techno shamanism. You know?
Techno shamanism. Such a good term.
I love LED.
LED shamanism.
LED lights, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that, like embracing technology and seeing, we've had this conversation some, that the mushroom is a technology. Obviously not like of human orient, but or design, but it's a technology that we're utilizing, like combining the alien technology.
Well, I mean, it's arguably becoming more of a human modified technology. You know, we've got a lot of new strains that were never there, and we do learn through science, you know, how the different compounds and the entourage effect of different components within the mushroom can be modulated to, you know, impact the experience, the nature-driven experience. I think that's the fucking jam, man. Like, there's like a lot of, I think there's a tendency for us all, self-included, to be like, humans shouldn't fuck with this thing that it is. But like, that's what makes every single thing we have. You know, they're even like, I love this talk. I love the conversation around native and non-native plants, right? If you look at the Amazon, there's a lot of kind of, we got to keep things as they are. There is substantial evidence that the entire Amazon was a man-made creation, that it was a planted garden, that the Amazon is not just a bunch of plants that just happen to grow this way, that it's a fucking engineered food forest. So many of the trees and stuff that we have here in Kentucky and whatever that we think of as native species are not native species. You know, so that's been something for me over the years that has been an interesting blurring of the lines. And so to just kind of be open to the evolution, to I'm speaking to myself as much as anything, to stop value judging, because we have this interesting kind of juxtaposition of our desire for consistency, but our inclination towards experimentation, you know, and we so often criticize the outcomes of the experiments of others, you know, not realizing that this is the collective mind evolving, right? And that's a beautiful thing. So again, this is just what I want to continue to take into my everyday perspective around the subject of psychedelics, as I have reevaluated my criticism of kind of whatever Western classical models, and just being more and more aware that everything is doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yes, sirree. I love that.
Are you calling me Sir E?
Sir E.
Yes, Sir E.
Oh.
Like Mr. E.
Sir E.
Sir E.
Whoa. I like that.
saying.
Maybe we'll implement that.
Multiple interpretations for all aspects of reality.
Oh gosh, I love. Without going on a tangent about this, just noting, I love the experience of realizing I'm criticizing something outside, like quote unquote outside of me, like an organization and the way it's doing this or that. Like, to be transparent, like sometimes someone will send a mushroom church website to me, and I'm like, oh, here we go again. Another mushroom church coming up.
Mushroom church. You don't know how you're not.
And I'm like, I look on the website and I'm like, oh, shouldn't have said that. Oh, like, yeah, just jumping right into criticizing them, and like I will catch it, and be like, whoa, like this could be a friend. This could be a really awesome ally. Like this group. Holy shit, they're doing something so cool, just like I'm doing. They're figuring it out. Like they're like trying. I mean, not all. There are some quote unquote churches that aren't really trying to be churches. They're just trying to like sell mushrooms, and which is great too. Like it is, I'm grateful for that in its own way. But like just recognizing that instead of being competitors, we could be allies, and that we're all in it together.
And not only can we be allies, whether we know it, we are.
Yeah.
We are allies. And so, that perspective taking into this world of therapy and hopefully, again, this is an outcome of increased consumption of psychedelics, is that we will see more clearly that we are all in this together and that the distinctions are just constructs. They're not nearly as real as we think they are.
Yeah. And one more for us before we conclude this podcast. And Amy and I were sitting outside last night and talking about all kinds of stuff. But she knows some people in her past. And I know I've got family members and people that I've known that have an opiate addiction. And it's been like an up and down thing in their lives. And so many people in Kentucky. And we have this iboga or this funding coming in for iboga treatment as an alternative for what's not working.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Still needs some advocacy, so feel free to call or write or email to the Kentucky legislature advocating for an adoption of iboga research.
Yeah. Maybe we can link that in the show notes. But anyway, thinking about 50 years from now, if that's implemented and it continues to build momentum, can you imagine all the people that are currently have just their lives are destroyed and their relationships are destroyed because of opiate addiction, and all those people having psychedelic experiences as the treatment 50 years from now, like that current state that we're in, which is insane to like conceive of how we've gotten here. So many people addicted to opiates and like turning it on its head with psychedelic experiences. It could be like, just what a difference that could make.
I believe very strongly that it is much more of a spiritual element than we're crediting it for. And there's going to be some pushback. There's going to be folks who are very far into the religious right, maybe, who believe. We saw some comments after our fellow church leader David Hodges was on Fox the other night. We had some folks come in and comment on Sanctuary and on my personal Instagram how we're drug dealing cult crazy folks, but as we start to experience more the spiritual growth that occurs through the mindful use of psychedelics and the clinical results, then we're going to be able to shift that perspective and shift that narrative. And just encouraging all of us to maintain an open mind. And I think Courtney and I exemplify this pretty well. It could always be better, but to catch ourselves when we are judging, and to really try to take a step back and again realize that we are all in this together, that those very clinical, material focused therapists who are new advocates for psychedelic medicine are just as important as, the shaman down in Peru or whatever. We're all part of this one big beautiful organism trying to understand itself through itself and its many reflections.
Yep.
Can we talk about sex more though? Or maybe we should just experience it so we can.
Let's do both. Let's do both. I like both.
I swear to God,
they both feed into each other.
I feel so compelled. I don't know how to put this into what kind of format to put this in, man. But just like you're saying, how you wouldn't have perceived sex as a spiritual thing years ago. I think that is the vast majority of our population, and that the fact that this incredibly essential aspect of our physical, spiritual, emotional health is not perceived as a multidimensional experience is something that there's a whole world out there to open up for people, and psychedelics are going to play a major role in that. They certainly have in my life, and I think yours as well. So it's all tied together, but just kidding. We won't go off on that right now. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Without you listening, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Comment, let us know your thoughts. Would love to know.
All right. Stay tuned for part 2.